Sayers will no longer be just a household name in Omaha. Nearly 3 years after his passing, his name is now going on a street sign.
Today, the City Council voted all in favor to rename a street near Kuntz Park in North Omaha. Our Bella Caracta shows us why that area is so important to the family.
Gale Sayers and his older brother Roger attended this elementary school and played in the Kuntz Park area just a couple blocks east. His older brother Roger believes that if kids see Gale's name on a street sign right near where they went to school, they'll get inspired.
It's a reminder that they can accomplish the same things that he did.
Like being the youngest person inducted into the Pro Football Hall of Fame. The running back played 7 seasons for the Chicago Bears. Councilmember Juanita Johnson, who represents the area, agreed on the significance of the sign.
We are what we see.
Yes.
And putting that iconic sign up there in the heart of North Omaha is definitely something that is very much needed to our inner city youth.
In addition to masterfully weaving through holes and running down the stretch, Sayers' achievements extended beyond the field, impacting the Omaha area long after hanging up his cleats.
He spent years supporting the Wesley House organization. He supported the Bryant Center for Youth, the Boys Club. You know, he came back to Omaha as often as he could because of his love for the city and the fact that he knew that his roots were right here in Omaha.
A celebration last year at Omaha Central High School, his alma mater, combined with his recognition, moves his brother who watched him achieve so much.
It's just something that tugs at your heart, but it's also something that you really, really appreciate. He would have a lot of good things to say about the Omaha area, period.
On your side, in Omaha, Bella Caracta, 6 News.
Certainly well deserved, and Roger tells us they plan to have a dedication ceremony when the sign goes up. When they decide on that date, we'll let you know.